Hi, I'm recording this on the morning of January 7th. I don't usually timestamp these videos because their intent is to share some ideas that hopefully aren't tied to a particular time. But today is different. Um, Anybody watching this video, I'm sure, is aware of what happened in the Capitol yesterday and the actions of our president and the Senate and so forth. What I want to talk to you about today is the idea of wrath and the idea of disorientation. And I have to say to you that in my lifetime, this is the third experience that I've had of both. The first was when I was a kid and John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And, I was one of those kids who grew up in grade school saying the Pledge of Allegiance and I had no concept, none of really any kind of conflict in the United States. This was pre-Civil Rights. So that was a very disorienting experience for me. The idea, even though there had been assassinations in the past that I knew from history, that could actually happen. Now, one of the results or one of the events that followed that assassination was the Civil Rights Bill and the Voting Acts Bill. And in my experience, that was sort of a galvanizing of the country to look or to begin to look at an injustice, one that we're still dealing with today. And we all know that fairly soon after that, there were two more assassinations, Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy. Fast forward to the beginning of the 21st century, and there was 9/11. And what's interesting about 9/11 is that the response was different. There was a path we could have gone down, which would have been to galvanize the world, hunt down the perpetrators, whoever they may be, and deal with them. But what we did was we upped the ante on perpetual war and created a conflagration that is still burning today. And now here we are, for the third time in my life, where there is an event that I would describe as disorienting, just like the other two. So what does disorienting mean? Well, if you look at the root of the word, it's orient. How do we orient ourselves? And then we take that word literally, and we orient ourselves by looking to the Orient, looking east, where the sun comes up. That was the way that human beings oriented themselves even before they understand how to navigate by stars. Sun came up in the east, set in the west. Now, if you are in a big field in the morning before the sunrise and you're in the middle of a blizzard or tornado or a hurricane, you can't see where the sun's going to come up. You don't know where you are and what direction you should head in. You don't know direction at all. That's pretty much where we are today. We don't know. There was an event in the Capitol. Yeah. We saw what Trump did. Yes. But we don't know how this thing is going to shake out. We don't know if it extends beyond the Capitol, if people are going to take actions elsewhere in the country. We don't even know what's going to happen in our government over the next couple of days. It's disorienting. And disorientation, from an intellectual perspective, is always essential for things to change. Why? Because if you have a structure, if you have convinced yourself you know how the way things are and the way things operate, then you're not going to change that drastically, because doing that would disorient you, and why would anybody do that on purpose? So events disorient us. And I've said this before in different forums, great leadership is about responding to events. most of the time, the vast majority of the time. Sometimes you get a leader who has an idea that they try to push forward, but that's tough if you don't have an event that allows you to put a container around it. So we're disoriented right now. That's one idea. The other idea is this idea of wrath. Now, again, in my experience, and it goes back to that time when I was a kid and a young man, I want to talk to you about two leaders. And they're both black men. I'm obviously not a black person. But the reason I use these examples is because the way that black people have been treated in this country, along with Native Americans, but certainly in the front of our minds most of the time these days, is that how black people have been treated in this country, is the clearest experience that I've had of injustice. So who are these two people? Well, the first is obviously Martin Luther King. And my experience of King, when he would speak, is there was a wrathfulness in him. And the wrathfulness was really based on a very deep sense of truth, a deep sense of what was right and what was wrong and what was just and what was unjust. And it was inescapable if you listen to that man, inescapable. And yet, he was not a rageful man. He did not promote violence. As a matter of fact, completely opposite to that. He understood that violence dissipated all the energy, and that the wrathfulness of truth was the course that he charted, and it is why he is remembered today. There's another man named Stokely Carmichael. Now, Stokely Carmichael is a very complex guy, and his legacy is marred by the fact that he was actively pursued by the government and slandered and had his life made miserable in many ways. But what he represents in comparison to King, in my experience, is the difference between wrath and rage. Rage or anger operates much more on the surface. Rage and anger is much more about some kind of an intellectual construct that says, I'm right and you're wrong. And it can easily tip over into the experience of not only am I right and you're wrong, but because you're wrong, I get to do violence to you. That's an experience we saw yesterday. That's rage. That's anger. It's very dangerous. It's also not based in an understanding, a basic human understanding of what is just and what is unjust. And that has nothing to do with the politics, okay? That has nothing to do with different kinds of opinions that people have, whether it's about abortion or states' rights or whatever it is. We have to have those discussions. And here's what was very interesting. I tend not to watch political debates. I think they're PR contests and they don't mean much. But last night, I listened to every single speech that was made in the Senate. And for the first time in memory for me, I saw that body deliberate. I saw people get up and actually state their views. And they weren't monolithic. They were all over the place, regardless of party. And that experience of seeing that restored some faith for me, because the Senate is supposed to be the most deliberative body in the world, right? I've never seen them deliberate in a long time, as I said, until last night. And Mitt Romney, and I'm not a huge Mitt Romney fan, but Mitt Romney actually said, the way out of this is to tell the truth. And you tell the truth not to the other guy who disagrees with you. You tell the truth to the people who agree with you. That's what you do. That is wrathful, right? That is having the courage to speak the truth to people who don't want to hear it and people who support you. and don't want to hear it. It's what we do with our friends when we need to talk to our friends and say, buddy, I think you're wrong on this. I think you need to rethink what's going on. Okay, disorientation, wrath. So here I sit in the morning in Santa Fe, New Mexico, not knowing what's going to happen today. And I spent some time thinking about, well, what do I do? What am I doing here in this life? And why am I doing it? And a lot of you may know me as a guy who works with dreams. And it's really unfortunate in a funny way that we call them dreams. Because as soon as we name something, we put it in a box or a pigeonhole and we go, oh, that's what that is. I don't think that's what this thing called dreams are. I think this experience we have when we create these stories as we sleep is a very ordinary part of our existence, and one that it is very useful to pay attention to. Because as we create those stories, 9 times out of 10, we're not particularly interested in what our ego says or what our brain has cooked up in terms of an argument. Those stories that we create are speaking to us wrathfully. They are speaking to us in a truth that exists only within us. You don't even need to tell anybody else. If you don't want to, it's fine, because it is your own internal dialogue. And having that dialogue is important, particularly now, and also fraught. Why? People don't like being disoriented. Okay, we want to frame. We want to understand, okay, what's going on and how do I think about this? And what I'm going to suggest to you is, just like a dream is disorienting when you write it down and read it for the first time because it doesn't make any sense, that is the state that we are going to be in for a little while, maybe even a long while, as we begin to reconstitute what the heck this is all about. And when I say that, I mean individually and collectively. Disorientation is uncomfortable and it can't last forever. Obviously, we got to figure out how to move forward. But it's very important right now. And the reason it's dangerous is because it's very easy for wrath to turn into rage. Very easy. And it's difficult for all of us to maintain our center and understand who we are and speak in a way, or not speak in a way, or either way, that comes from this understanding within us of what is just. And that isn't the argument about why the other guy is wrong, okay? If you go back and look at King, he spoke about injustice, but he spoke about injustice from the perspective of what is just. What is that truth? He's a great gift to this country because of that. So I work with this part of our experience that doesn't make any sense because it allows us access to who we are. And here's what I'm going to say to you, and I've said this a number of times, probably in a more benign fashion. Pay attention to your dreams. If you want to get into this work, get on my schedule. It's a very simple thing to do. There's a link below. Because we're not going to make our way through this by overwhelming the other guy, right? By this self-righteous, they were wrong, see, blah, 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 blah. Because you know what? The people who we're going to say are wrong represent a lot of other human beings in this country. And there are a lot of different views in this country. And we got to start having those conversations. And what I saw in the Senate last night, I don't know if it holds up or not, but that was the beginning of the kind of process that we need, not only in the country, but internally within us. Because guess what? We are a combination of a whole bunch of different energies and a whole bunch of different perspectives. And if we just seize on one, That is the definition of a fanatic. And I don't care what part of the spectrum you are on in terms of politics. If you just dance with one archetype, if you just dance with one energy, I'm right, you're wrong, we're doomed. Okay? We're complex people. The only way we get to figure this out is to understand who the other person is, and more importantly, who the heck we are. Pay attention to your dreams. Pay attention to your experience that lies outside of the arguments you cook up in your head. So, more to come for all of us. I think this is going to be a year of a lot of disorientation. Hopefully, not the kind where people are in fear for their lives, which is what a lot of people were yesterday. But the kind of disorientation that makes us look at things in a different perspective and understand that, guess what? We're all in this together. And this democracy that is a mess, and this country that is a mess, is the opportunity we have. This is where we are. And we do have a history of pulling ourselves together. So take care of yourselves. This pandemic is raging. A lot of people are in a lot of economic trouble. Help if you can. Anybody you can. And we'll put one foot in front of the other. But do not hesitate to get on my schedule if that's what you feel is useful to you. Take care of yourselves.